Welcome back. Let's reading some more. It's super hot in my apartment today, so just waiting the sun go down. Now it's 2 p.m. So the sun go down in 6 hours. So we're just reading. Now it's 31. So just keep reading till the sun goes down. In like six hours, the sun go down. So we're just reading this, and then charge my camcorder. Then I'm reading something else like spacecraft, SpaceX, Starship. Read this one today. So let's do that.
History of rockets. See also, History of gunpowder. The first rockets were used as propulsion systems for arrows, and may have appeared as early as the 10th century in Song Dynasty China. However, more solid documentary evidence does not appear until the 13th century. The technology probably spread across Eurasia in the wake of the Mongol invasions of the mid-13th century. Usage of rockets as weapons before modern rocketry is attested to in China, Korea, India, and Europe. One of the first recorded rocket launches is the Wasp Nest fire arrow launcher produced by the Ming Dynasty in 1380. In Europe, rockets were also used in the same year at the Battle of Chioggia. The Joseon Kingdom of Korea used a type of mobile multiple rocket launcher known as the Munjong Hwacha by 1451. Iron-cased rockets were used by Kingdom of Mizorean rockets, and by Marathas during the mid-18th century, and were later modified and used by the British. The later models and improvements were known as the Congreve rocket and used in the Napoleonic Wars. Precursors, edit. The earliest known example of a device displaying the principles essential to rocket flight was around 400 BC when Archytas, a Greek Pythagorean, propelled a wooden bird along suspended wires using steam as propellant. The wooden pigeon was tied to a pole by a wire. When the plug containing the steam was released, the steam propelled the pigeon in circles around the pole. About 300 years later, Hero of Alexandria created a similar rocket-like device known as a neolipile that used steam as propulsion. A sphere was mounted on top of a water basin, which was heated with fire, turning the water to steam that traveled into the sphere through pipes. The steam escaped through two L-shaped tubes on opposite sides, causing the sphere to rotate. These devices have been described as steam rockets, proto-rockets, and employing principles essential to rocket flight and the action-reaction principle that preceded true rockets. Origins, edit. See also, Timeline of the Gunpowder Age and Fire Arrow. The dating of the invention of the first gunpowder rocket, otherwise known as the gunpowder-propelled fire arrow, is disputed. The history of Song attributes the invention to two different people at different times. Feng Zhisheng in 969 and Tang Fu in 1000. However, Joseph Needham argues that rockets could not have existed before the 12th century, since the gunpowder formulas listed in the Wuying Zhongjiao are not suitable as rocket propellant. Rockets may have been used as early as 1232, when reports appeared describing fire arrows and iron pots that could be heard for 5 leagues, 25 kilometers, or 15 miles, when they exploded upon impact, causing devastation for a radius of 600 meters, 2,000 feet, apparently due to shrapnel. A flying fire lance that had reusable barrels was also mentioned to have been used by the Jin dynasty, 1115-1234. Rockets are recorded to have been used by the Song Navy in a military exercise dated to 1245. Internal combustion rocket propulsion is mentioned in a reference to 1264, recording that the ground ratter type of firework had frightened the Empress Mother Gongxing at a feast held in her honor by her son the Emperor Lizong. Later developments, edit. Further information, gunpowder weapons in the Ming Dynasty. Subsequently, rockets are included in the military treatise Hualongjing, also known as the Fire Drake Manual, written by the Chinese artillery officer Jiao Yu in the mid-14th century. This text mentions the first known multi-stage rocket, the fire dragon issuing from the water, Huolong Chu Shui, thought to have been used by the Chinese Navy. Rocket launchers known as wasp nests were ordered by the Ming army in 1380. In 1400, the Ming loyalist Li Jinglong used rocket launchers against the army of Zhu Di, Yongle Emperor. Spread of rocket technology, edit. The American historian Frank H. Winter proposed in the proceedings of the 20th and 21st History Symposia of the International Academy of Astronautics that southern China and the Laotian Community Rocket Festivals might have been key in the subsequent spread of rocketry in the Orient. Mongols, edit. The Chinese fire arrow was adopted by the Mongols in northern China, who employed Chinese rocketry experts as mercenaries in the Mongol army. Rockets are thought to have spread via the Mongol invasions to other areas of Eurasia in the mid-13th century. Rocket-like weapons are reported to have been used at the Battle of Mahai in the year 1241. Middle East, edit. Between 1270 and 1280, Hassan al-Rama wrote his Al-Fuzi wa al-Manasib al-Harbiyya, the book of military horsemanship and ingenious war devices, which included 107 gunpowder recipes, 22 of which are for rockets. According to Ahmed Y. Hassan, al-Rama's recipes were more explosive than rockets used in China at the time. The terminology used by al-Rama indicates a Chinese origin for the gunpowder weapons he wrote about, such as rockets and fire lances. Ibn al-Bayta, an Arab from Spain who had immigrated to Egypt, described saltpeter as snow of China, Arabic, Thaj al-En. Al-Bayta died in 1248. The earlier Arab historians called saltpeter Chinese snow and Chinese salt. The Arabs used the name Chinese arrows to refer to rockets. The Arabs called fireworks Chinese flowers. While saltpeter was called Chinese snow by Arabs, it was called Chinese salt, Persian, namek-in, by the Iranians, or salt from the Chinese marshes, namek-chn Persian. Indian subcontinent, edit. In the Indian subcontinent, mercenaries are recorded to have used handheld rockets in 1300. By the mid-14th century, Indian armies were also using rockets in warfare. In the Mughal Empire under Akbar's reign during the 16th century, Mughal artillery rockets began to use metal casing, which made them more weatherproof and allowed a larger amount of gunpowder, increasing their destructive power. Mughal iron rockets were described by European visitors, including Frahuswa Bernier, who witnessed the 1658 Battle of Samyuga fought between brothers Aurangzeb and Dara Shikoh. Mysorean rockets, edit. Main article, Mysorean rockets. 1. A painting showing the Mysorean army fighting the British forces with Mysorean rockets. 2. A Mysorean soldier from India, using his Mysorean rocket as a flagstaff, Robert Home, 179 3/4. 3. Use of rockets in an assault by Mysorean troops on Travancore Line fortification, the 29th of December, 1789. The Kingdom of Mysore used rockets during the 18th century during the Anglo-Mysore Wars. In 1792, iron-cased rockets were successfully used by Tipu Sultan, the ruler of the Kingdom of Mysore, in India, against the larger British East India Company forces during the Anglo-Mysore Wars. The British then took an active interest in the technology and developed it further during the 19th century. Use of iron tubes for holding propellant enabled higher thrust and longer range for the missile, up to 2 kilometers range. After Tipu's defeat in the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War and the capture of the Mysore iron rockets, they were influential in British rocket development, inspiring the Congreve rocket, which was soon put into use in the Napoleonic Wars. Later use, edit. According to James Forbes, Marathas also used iron-encased rockets in their battles. Korea, edit. The Korean Kingdom of Joseon started producing gunpowder in 1374 and was producing cannons and rockets by 1377. However, the multiple rocket launching carts known as the Munjongwacha did not appear until 1451. Europe, edit. In Europe, Roger Bacon mentions gunpowder in his Opus Majus of 1267. However, rockets do not feature in European warfare until the 1380 Battle of Chioggia. According to the 18th century historian Ludovico Antonio Muratori, rockets were used in the war between the republics of Genoa and Venice at Chioggia in 1380. It is uncertain whether Muratori was correct in his interpretation, as the reference might also have been to Bombard, but Muratori is the source for the widespread claim that the earliest recorded European use of rocket artillery dates to 1380. Jean Ferozat, c. 1337 c. 1405, had the idea of launching rockets through tubes, so that they could make more accurate flights. Ferozat's idea is a forerunner of the modern rocket-propelled grenade. Conrad Kaiser described rockets in his famous military treatise Bella Fortis around 1405. Kaiser describes three types of rockets: swimming, free-flying and captive. Jones de Fontana in Bellicarum Instrumentorum Liber, c. 1420, described flying rockets in the shape of doves, running rockets in the shape of hares, and a large car driven by three rockets, as well as a large rocket torpedo with the head of a sea monster. Later developments, edit. In the mid-16th century, Conrad Haas wrote a book that described rocket technology that combined fireworks and weapons technologies. This manuscript was discovered in 1961, in the Cebu Public Records, Cebu Public Records Varia 2374. His work dealt with the theory of motion of multistage rockets, different fuel mixtures using liquid fuel, and introduced delta-shaped fins and bell-shaped nozzles. The name rocket comes from the Italian roccetta, meaning bobbin or little spindle, given due to the similarity in shape to the bobbin or spool used to hold the thread to be fed to a spinning wheel. The Italian term was adopted into German in the mid-16th century, by Leonhard Frasperger in a book on rocket artillery published in 1557, using the spelling roget, and by Conrad Haas as racket. Adoption into English dates to ca. 1610. Johann Schmidlapp, a German fireworks maker, is believed to have experimented with staging in 1590. Nagari Hassan Celebi was a legendary Ottoman aviator who, according to an account written by Evliya Celebi, made a successful manned rocket flight. Evliya Celebi purported that in 1633 Nagari launched in a 7-winged rocket using 50 oka, 63.5 kilograms, or 140 lbs, of gunpowder from Saraybanu, the point below Topkapı Palace in Istanbul. Artis Magnae Artillerii Pars Prima, Great Art of Artillery. The first part, also known as the Complete Art of Artillery, first printed in Amsterdam in 1650, was translated to French in 1651, German in 1676, English and Dutch in 1729 and Polish in 1963. For over 2 centuries, this work of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth nobleman Kazimierz Siemianowicz was used in Europe as a basic artillery manual. The book provided the standard designs for creating rockets, fireballs, and other pyrotechnic devices. It contained a large chapter on caliber, construction, production and properties of rockets, for both military and civil purposes, including multi-stage rockets, batteries of rockets, and rockets with delta wing stabilizers, instead of the common guiding rods. In his 1696 work, The Making of Rockets, in 2 parts. The first containing the making of rockets for the meanest capacity. The other to make rockets by a duplicate proposition, to 1,000 pound weight or higher. Robert Anderson proposed constructing rockets out of a piece of a gun barrel whose metal casing is much stronger than pasteboard or wood. 19th century, edit. William Congreve, 1772–1828, son of the Controller of the Royal Arsenal, Woolwich, London, became a major figure in the field. From 1801 Congreve researched the original design of missile rockets and started a vigorous development program at the Arsenal's laboratory. Congreve prepared a new propellant mixture, and developed a rocket motor with a strong iron tube with conical nose. This early Congreve rocket weighed about 32 pounds, 14.5 kilograms. The Royal Arsenal's first demonstration of solid-fuel rockets took place in 1805. The rockets were effectively used during the Napoleonic Wars and the War of 1812. Congreve published 3 books on rocketry. Subsequently, the use of military rockets spread throughout the Western world. At the Battle of Baltimore in 1814, the rockets fired on Fort McHenry by the rocket vessel HMS Erebus were the source of the rocket's red glare described by Francis Scott Key in the Star-Spangled Banner. Rockets were also used in the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. Early rockets were very inaccurate. Without the use of spinning or any controlling feedback loop, they had a strong tendency to veer sharply away from their intended course. The early Missourian rockets and their successor British Congreve rockets reduced veer somewhat by attaching a long stick to the end of a rocket, similar to modern bottle rockets, to make it harder for the rocket to change course. The largest of the Congreve rockets was the 32-pound, 14.5 kilograms, carcass, which had a 15-foot, 4.6 m, stick. Originally, sticks were mounted on the side, but this was later changed to mounting them in the center of the rocket, reducing drag and enabling the rocket to be more accurately fired from a segment of pipe. In 1815 Alexander Dmitrievich Zasyadko, 1779–1837, began his work on developing military gunpowder rockets. He constructed rocket launching platforms, which allowed firing of rockets in salvos, 6 rockets at a time, and gun-laying devices. Zasyadko elaborated a tactic for military use of rocket weaponry. In 1820 Zasyadko was appointed head of the Petersburg Armory, Okhtensky Powder Factory, Pyrotechnic Laboratory and the first highest artillery school in Russia. He organized rocket production in a special rocket workshop and formed the first rocket subunit in the Imperial Russian Army. Artillery Captain Joseph Bin, 1794–1850, of the Kingdom of Poland started experiments with what was then called in Polish Ręka Komorska. These culminated in his 1819 report Notes sur les fuses incendiaires, German edition, Erfahrungen über die Kongrevischen Brandraketen bis zum Jahr 1819 in der Königlichen Polnischen Artillerie gesammelt, Weimar 1820. The research took place in the Warsaw Arsenal, where Captain Joseph Kosinski also developed multiple rocket launchers adapted from horse artillery gun carriage. The first Rocketeer Corps formed in 1822, it first saw combat during the Polish-Russian War 1830-31. Accuracy greatly improved in 1844 when William Hale modified the rocket design so that thrust was slightly vectored, causing the rocket to spin along its axis of travel like a bullet. The Hale rocket removed the need for a rocket stick, traveled further due to reduced air resistance, and was far more accurate. In 1865 the British Colonel Edward Mounier Boxer built an improved version of the Congreve rocket by placing two rockets in one tube, one behind the other. Early 20th century rocket pioneers, edit. At the beginning of the 20th century, there was a burst of scientific investigation into interplanetary travel, fueled by the creativity of fiction writers such as Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, as well as by philosophical movements like Russian Cosmism. Scientists seized on the rocket as a technology that was able to achieve this in real life, a possibility first recognized in 1861 by William Leach. In 1903, high school mathematics teacher Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, 1857-1935, inspired by Verne and Cosmism, published The Exploration of Cosmic Space by Means of Reaction Devices, the first serious scientific work on space travel. The Tsiolkovsky rocket equation, the principle that governs rocket propulsion, is named in his honor. Although it had been discovered previously, Tsiolkovsky is honored as being the first to apply it to the question of whether rockets could achieve speeds necessary for space travel. He also advocated the use of liquid hydrogen and oxygen for propellant, calculating their maximum exhaust velocity. His work was essentially unknown outside the Soviet Union, but inside the country it inspired further research, experimentation and the formation of the Society for Studies of Interplanetary Travel in 1924. In 1912, Robert Isnopeltery published a lecture on rocket theory and interplanetary travel. He independently derived Tsiolkovsky's rocket equation, did basic calculations about the energy required to make round trips to the moon and planets, and he proposed the use of atomic power, i.e. radium, to power a jet drive. In 1912 Robert Goddard, inspired from an early age by H.G. Wells and by his personal interest in science, began a serious analysis of rockets, concluding that conventional solid-fuel rockets needed to be improved in three ways. First, fuel should be burned in a small combustion chamber, instead of building the entire propellant container to withstand the high pressures. Second, rockets could be arranged in stages. Finally, the exhaust speed, and thus the efficiency, could be greatly increased to beyond the speed of sound by using a de Laval nozzle. He patented these concepts in 1914. He also independently developed the mathematics of rocket flight. Goddard worked on developing solid propellant rockets since 1914, and demonstrated a light battlefield rocket to the U.S. Army Signal Corps only 5 days before the signing of the armistice that ended World War I. He also started developing liquid propellant rockets in 1921, yet he had not been taken seriously by the public. Nevertheless, Goddard reclusively developed and flew a small liquid-fueled rocket. He developed the technology for 214 patents, 212 of which his wife published after his death. During World War I, Yves Le Perrier, a French naval officer, who later invented a pioneering scuba diving apparatus, developed air-to-air solid-fuel Le Perrier rockets, used to destroy captive observation balloons, called saucisses, sausages in French, or Drachen, dragons in German, used by German artillery spotters. The rather crude black powder, steel-tipped incendiary rockets made by the Ruggieri firm were first tested from a Voisin aircraft, wing-bolted on a fast Pickard Pictet sports car and then used in battle on real aircraft from May 1916. A typical layout involved 8 electrically fired Le Perrier rockets fitted on the interplane struts of a Nieuport aircraft. When fired from a sufficiently short distance, a spread of Le Perrier rockets proved quite deadly. Belgian ace Willy Coppens claimed dozens of Drachen kills during World War I. In 1920, Goddard published his ideas and experimental results in a method of reaching extreme altitudes. The work included remarks about sending a solid fuel rocket to the moon, which attracted worldwide attention and was both praised and ridiculed. A New York Times editorial suggested, referring to Newton's third law, that Professor Goddard, with his chair in Clark College and the countenancing of the Smithsonian Institution, does not know the relation of action to reaction, and of the need to have something better than a vacuum against which to react. To say that would be absurd. Of course he only seems to lack the knowledge ladled out daily in high schools. New York Times, the 13th of January, 1920. In reality, in terms of Newton's third law, a rocket pushes against its exhaust gases, so the lack of surrounding air is not relevant. In 1923, German Hermann Oberth, 1894-1989, published Die Rakete zu den Planetenraumen, The Rocket into Planetary Space, a version of his doctoral thesis, after the University of Munich had rejected it. In 1929, he published a book, Wie zur Raumschifffahrt, Ways to Spaceflight, and static-fired and uncooled liquid-fueled rocket engine for a brief time. In 1924, Tsiolkovsky also wrote about multi-stage rockets, in Cosmic Rocket Trains. Modern Rocketry, edit. Pre-World War II, edit. Modern rockets originated in the US when Robert Goddard attached a supersonic, de Laval, nozzle to the combustion chamber of a liquid-fueled rocket engine. This turned the hot combustion chamber gas into a cooler, highly directed hypersonic jet of gas, more than doubling the thrust and raising the engine efficiency from 2% to 64%. On the 16th of March, 1926, Goddard launched the world's first liquid-fueled rocket in Auburn, Massachusetts. During the 1920s, a number of rocket research organizations appeared worldwide. Rocketry in the Soviet Union began in 1921 with extensive work at the Gas Dynamics Laboratory, GDL, where the first test firing of a solid fuel rocket was carried out in March 1928, which flew for about 1,300 meters in 1931. The world's first successful use of rockets to assist takeoff of aircraft were carried out on AU-1, the Soviet designation for an Avro 504 trainer, which achieved about 100 successful assisted takeoffs. Further developments in the early 1930s included firing rockets from aircraft and the ground. In 1932, in-air test firings of RS-82 missiles from a Tupolev I-4 aircraft armed with 6 launchers successfully took place. In September 1931, the Group for the Study of Reactive Motion, GERD, was formed and was responsible for the first Soviet liquid-propelled rocket launch, the GERD-9, on the 17th of August 1933, which reached an altitude of 400 meters, 1,300 feet. In 1933, GDL and GERD were merged to form the Reactive Scientific Research Institute, RNII, and developments were continued, including designing several variations for ground-to-air, ground-to-ground, air-to-ground and air-to-air combat. The RS-82 rockets were carried by Policarpo 515, I-16 and I-153 fighter planes, the Polikarpov R-5 reconnaissance plane and the Ilyushin Il-2 close air support plane, while the heavier RS-132 rockets could be carried by bombers. Many small ships of the Soviet Navy were also fitted with the RS-82 rocket, including the Mo-class small guard ship. The earliest known use by the Soviet Air Force of aircraft-launched unguided anti-aircraft rockets in combat against heavier-than-air aircraft